And welcome into the Legislative Lounge. We want to, give a big shout out to all the people listening today. We love you guys, and we thank you for joining us today. We do have a special episode here today that we're going to dive into, but my name is Nate Big, your host, or Nate Bigelow, by my handle, and then we also have Mike Bales with us as our co-host. How you doing today, Mike?
It's a beautiful day here in Arizona, like always.
Absolutely. So, as of today, we do have a special episode, like I said, where it has to do with the importance of our children. You know, me and Mike being a father of multiple children ourselves, it's one of the most important things to us because, our children are our future. Without, investing into them, protecting them, where's our country going to be at without them, right? And the most important thing as a father is making sure that our children are safe at all times. It's one of the biggest things in our minds that, we don't really know a whole lot of, at all times where our children is, where their safety is, especially if you take them to school or to different programs where you're not at in different areas. So it's one of those things that's always on your mind, and especially when you go to school, because that is a place of where it should be a safe haven, an area where they're educated, an area where we can trust the administration and the teachers to protect our children, because they literally go to school for years on end to help advocate to our children the understandings of not only math, arithmetic, and things like that, but they also invest their own personal time into them about life. But the problem is you've seen too many politicians and too many people getting political in our school system that's allowing avenues like VOCA funding here in the state of Texas, which, if you're not familiar with, is the Victims Against of Crime Act that was instituted back in the late or mid 80s or so, which at first was a great program, right? And you always know the saying, the path to hell is paved by good intentions, right? But today we have an individual that's, I'm going to call it a victim of VOCA, because politicians have gotten a hold of VOCA, which was initially intended to help advocate for children in dangerous home situations, to get them into counseling and different areas like that. However, now it's moved into a completely left avenue that's involving the absolute disconnect with parents and allowing counselors to advocate to children about gender change and pharmaceuticals. And we're going to hear from a mother today that had a run into it that has altered her life. So we want to welcome Alexandra Butler here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, tell us a little bit about you. We don't have to dive right in, but just tell us a little bit about you and what you've experienced through all of this.
Okay, so I have 6 children, okay? I've been married a couple of times. I've got a past, so I haven't been saved all my life, but I tell you what, I'm real serious about the Lord now,
Absolutely.
and my principles, I stand with the conservative principles, so anybody want to know what side I'm leaning to, definitely towards the right, because, God is number one in my home. After He sorted out my past and getting me into a place where, I can be healthy and balanced in my mind, not so toxic. I had some growing up to do, and there's no real, book that comes with raising children. You're just kind of ambling through this thing, taking it day by day, trusting God, just doing your thing, but for a while I had my kids out of school because I just wasn't really sure how I felt about my children being away for 8 hours a day and somebody just having so much of an impact on them,
Right.
But then when, and there's different things that happen, we were going through a divorce, and, Satan can often get in the midst of that, and cause situations where maybe you're not as close to your children, or maybe you're away from your children, for a little longer than normal than you would be. You can't just helicopter over them anymore. They're going to dad's, and dad has control over there. And then when they come to mom's, it's a different story. So we go from the children being in, at this time I only have, 4 kids at that time. we decided to put the kids back in public school. I don't want to be too controversial. I'm anti-vax, so that in itself is an issue, getting kids into public school, because I had to do religious exemptions. Whenever some other kid who's vaccinated in the school gets sick with whatever illness it is, I have to pull my kid out during the gestation period. And, just there's rules that you have to abide by when you put your kids in public school. So that already kind of puts a target on you as a parent when you're enrolling your child in school. So we go from homeschooling to putting our kids into public school. The school has changed completely since I've been to school. I graduated in the year 2000. Things are a lot different. You know, they are not. Things have progressed, I guess is what they call it. Absolutely. I wouldn't call it. I would call it regressed, because why would I ever fathom that sending my child to school, a school that I'm always at, that I'm always getting calls from, because she has Asperger's and other stuff. So I'm always at the school, whether it's holidays and all that. I'm that parent, right? But why would I ever think that my child is secretly going to counseling because they want to be a boy? I did see that my child, started kind of shifting, as far as like their sexuality. We talk, but I did notice, some changes in her. And so, but I didn't think for 1 minute that there would be counseling at school, basically encouraging this. Now, mind you, at home, we're going through divorce, we're going through all of these things, but, I'm trying to keep an air of Jesus Christ in my home. So at the same time, we'll talk about stuff, and maybe she didn't feel comfortable talking to mom about it, but over time, I'm doing laundry, I'm finding chest binders,
Right.
And, I confront her with it. I'm like, girl, why you got this binder? I was like, your boobs are bigger than mine. Like, why are you, what's this going to solve? I'm real common sense about stuff.
Right.
And I'm not realizing that, like, I'm hurting her by doing that. Like, I didn't realize that, because I've always been the same. I haven't changed. I'm still the same old person, And, so more and more they're going to dad's house, pulling away from mom. And because I'm too strict,
right.
And it's just more, I like structure. I like things to go a certain way. I mean, a lot of people do.
Absolutely.
That's okay. It doesn't make you wrong and whatever. They just knew that at dad's they could do things that they couldn't do at mom's house. So kids will use that to their advantage. It's like one of the biggest forms of manipulation that happens in divorces, sad to say, And so one day, I'm picking up my child, and I'm not trying to get too long-winded here, but
no, you're okay.
She asked me if I'll take her to Walgreens, and to pick up some medicine. I'm thinking maybe it's like an antibiotic, because, I would never think my child's on hormones or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
And because I just don't know how this thing has progressed, And, I'm taking her to Walgreens, and she comes out with these boxes. And I'm looking at the boxes, and she's got this like kind of weird smug look on her face. And I was like, I just didn't like the spirit. So I'm like, what's going on with you? Why are you acting funny?
So to really dive into it a little bit further here. So now you're not native to Texas, right?
No, I'm not. We're from Wichita, Kansas.
Okay,
originally.
So I'm originally from Michigan. Mike's over in Arizona, so we
awesome.
Definitely understand that.
Right.
So
I'm a transplant.
So am I. But that's why we come to Texas, because we love it so much.
I know that's right.
But so what was happening is that you were unaware of a situation with your child, having these feelings of wanting to change gender.
Yes.
And you, unbeknownst to you, the school noticed this and put her through the VOCA program and gave her specific counseling, which led to her getting hormone treatments.
Absolutely. And come to find out, they also had linked her up with a counselor outside of the school that was very LGBT, that gave my child the option if they could include their parents or not. And so I had no idea about this. And by law, they're not required to tell you, because my child is a victim of religious persecution now.
That's
when
terrifying.
they change the definition of like what abuse is. You don't actually have to like hit your kid and all of that. But once they learn about the areas in which they can be a victim, they begin to use that against you in a sense. They'll say that they're not, right? And that's where the gaslighting is where, we're not hiding anything from you. We're just protecting the child, the best interests of the child. Well, excuse me, the best interest of my child is not going through some counseling where I don't even know what's being said. I don't know what thoughts you're putting in her head. She's a child. She's a
Right.
kid. Like, she's very impressionable. She has Asperger's. You know, they don't understand social cues very well and who's really their friend and who's really not. They don't get that kind of stuff. And so, you know, she's going to not just counseling at school, but also counseling outside of the school through a free program in Kansas called ComCare. So there's this pipeline from the school to external resources that they then find people that will, because who is signing for the hormones? Like, who is
Right.
writing this prescription? What doctor are you seeing? Your parents don't know. It's not on my insurance documents. It's not anywhere. I have no idea you're being seen by a doctor.
Right. And I know Mike and I, you know, having a little bit of, you know, knowledge, having grown up in a medical household, and Mike being, you know, through training of military and whatnot, can take a look at that, and it's like, absolutely, who is this physician in the
Right.
school that's providing a you know, on all intents and purposes, a biological changing medicine?
Right.
That doesn't make any
That's
sense to me.
It's not just that part, right? You're also going to run into a legal conflict
Yes.
because there's one legal aspect of it where they're probably going off the doctor-patient confidentiality aspect, but they're totally disregarding the fact that a child is a liberty interest of the parent until that child is
Absolutely.
18 or becomes emancipated or what have you.
Absolutely.
And that could actually bring up what could be a class action lawsuit against the state government.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Absolutely. And I don't know the language, you know, like, I don't know how they define these things. I know that the parent is basically has no rights. This thing has been weaponized, I believe, against the parent, so that, and not just all parents, because some parents are like, okay, well, what do I got to do? They give in, you know, what do I got to do to get my kid back? I'm not that parent. You know,
Right.
I'm gonna stand my ground. Look,
Right.
I had a daughter. I'm not a son. You know, I started getting, you know, from my child, ultimatums like, if you don't refer to me as your son, then I don't want you in my life. And I said, well, sorry, sayonara. You're grown now. You're
Wow.
making adult decisions.
So through this whole experience, it's actually because of what the school system allowed into your daughter's life.
Yes.
It's severed your connection with her.
Completely. Like,
Wow.
we are not close at all. Like, and
That's
I'm not going to
terrifying.
blame that whole situation on that. I'm saying that a lot of things play into that,
Yeah.
but that there was a very underlying, that whole LGBT thing is the underlying reason for why my children, my older children from my first marriage and we're at odds with each other.
Right. And
You
I
know?
I know even within the LGBT community, you know, there's a lot of you know, individuals that are lesbian or gay that don't agree with any of this. I mean, me and Mike have several friends all
do
over
too.
social media that they advocate right beside us.
I do too.
I mean, there's a whole program called Gays Against Groomers.
Absolutely.
And that goes right along with the situation is we should be able to trust our schools to send our children there without indoctrinating them into this nonsense of gender identity. Because in all intents and purposes, prior to I would say 2015 is right around when we started to hear
Right.
on a national stage the transgender movement that gender and sex were synonymous,
At one time.
and they still are by the definition of it.
Biologically,
But
yes.
yet they want to change the idea of what gender and sex are, even though we can show them the definition,
Right.
and it's in the synonyms
Right.
of one another.
Absolutely.
This is the craziness that we deal with in this world, but it's like there is some kind of it revolves me back to the movie Idiocracy. Have you ever seen
yeah,
it?
I love that movie.
I seem like we're
It's
on
a documentary.
Yeah, it's like it seems like we're on that pathway to that to be that here, and it's not going to take no 500 years like it did in the movie.
No, we're here actually kind of now. Basically, I mean, this is I'm shocked at the things that are happening, and I'm really shocked though at the amount of gaslighting and manipulation that they're doing with this vague language in these bills. Like, when you present these bills, they need to be very specific, because now we're seeing things that at one time maybe on the surface seemed innocent. They're now being weaponized against parents that may have strict religious structure in their home. I mean, and I'm not saying I'm so strict that she can never come to me and talk to me about it. I'm very open. Like anybody that knows me personally, they're like, Alex is real chill. I'm a laid back person. Just keep it real with me. This whole thing felt very sneaky, underhanded. They're uprooting the doctrines that I've placed, the seeds that I've planted in my children. Who knows what they're saying about Jesus Christ? Who knows what they're saying about anything that goes on in my home? I don't know. And before I even get my shoes tied, the lies already made it all the way around. So it's like there's no defense for me. Right. I look like a terrible parent, a terrible person, and I'm just like, what do I do now?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's wild when you start to think about it. A contributing factor to that breakdown, that unfortunate breakdown in your relationship, is the introduction of the testosterone into your daughter, which can increase aggressiveness.
Absolutely.
It can increase confrontation. Then like you do the flip side of it, if you start introducing estrogen into a young male, it creates emotional instability. And we look at schools as they should be a safe haven and a center for learning and preserving innocence. And now we're at a point in our lives in 2025 where that innocence being stripped from them.
Yeah, it's gone.
Right.
They've corrupted the children.
And the thing is, you were just saying that your daughter has Asperger's, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is already a neurological disorder. And it's like, where was the factorization of that into the treatment of hormones being introduced?
I think they purposely target kids with Asperger's and autism. And that's why I think just kind of throw this out here. This is my opinion personally. I think the whole vaccine thing, I think that played into it because we never had those symptoms until after I was forced. They basically bullied me into a vaccine because I was starting my whole anti-vax thing. And when I told my doctor, hey, I don't want to do any vaccines this time, I'm kind of researching, they were offended.
Oh, absolutely.
They sent against my beliefs. I told them I don't believe in it. I'm researching. Just give me some time. They sent 2 nurses in. Each had needles. And they stuck a needle in each of the daughter that we're referring to in this situation, each thigh. 6 weeks later, because it was like a knot in both legs for the whole 6 weeks. 6 weeks later, she has a seizure. And we're in the hospital. She's hooked to machines. She's got EEG monitors strapped to her head. We're trying to figure out what's going on. They diagnosed her with a neurological disorder at that time. I'm.
What is she, like 3 to 6 months old?
Yeah. No. This happened when she was 7 years old.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
she was fine beforehand.
Completely. Never had any issues. I mean, a little headstrong, but
right. I mean,
it's a child. And but never any neurological issues. But that seizure, after those
social cues and all that were
everything
normal?
was normal.
Wow.
Everything was normal. And after that, it's just as a mother, and you have that bond with your child, you start to see something's shifted here.
Absolutely.
And when she had that seizure, and then this same exact situation happened to me again with her younger sister. Same identical situation with the needles. Like, I think what happened was I had to leave the room. We had an incident. I had to take her to the hospital, and it wasn't like a seizure or anything. She had to get stitches or something. And then they come in there questioning about vaccinations.
Right.
And I'm like, we're good. We're good. And I had to leave the room, and I think her father was there. He went ahead and allowed them to give her a shot. Literally 6 weeks later, a seizure. And not just any seizures. She's having frontal lobe seizures in which she can't even... She's not asleep. Her eyes are not closed, but they're grand mal seizures while she's completely awake, and you can ask her questions, and she'll talk and everything.
Oh, okay. So is her body like shaking?
Yeah, the body's tensing completely, like a full contraction, like every muscle.
But she's not moving though.
No, not moving
at
all.
So those are called absent seizures. It's where they're able to actually communicate. But it's right in the frontal lobe, but you'll see them just stiff up. Yeah.
See, when this happened, they had no words for it. They were still studying this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Practicing medicine in this area. So they were like, I've never seen this. The doctor, we've got a team of doctors around her. We've never seen this, and they would not allow me to associate it with any of the vaccinations.
absolutely
you know?
not. And I could do a whole episode on this
Right.
because you're gonna find this is my show, so I'll say it. I'm anti-vax, and
Right.
I will be. I didn't always used to be,
Same.
but when I dived into the change,
Yes.
because if you take a look at that information, and like I say, I'm not gonna dive into this big time
Not today.
but you take a look at the difference between the ingredients and the levels
Right.
back in the 90s when I was vaccinated
Right.
versus nowadays,
Right.
it's completely different.
Right.
So, and I mean, I've got a test subject. I've got 2 daughters.
Right.
Right. I was in the learning phase with my oldest,
So you
and
understand what I'm
I
saying.
wouldn't listen to my wife, who is all natural.
Oh, yeah.
She writes books.
Right,
Like she's got her
right.
whole website and everything
yeah.
on this stuff, right? And I wouldn't listen to her. So our oldest is actually vaccinated up to 12 months.
See, I understand that.
Our
Oldest is-
youngest is not at all.
Right.
Not even the vitamin K
Right.
into the eye when
Right,
she
we
was
don't
born.
do
None of
any
that,
of that.
right? Guess who gets sick more often?
the vaccinated child,
And who gets more severe sickness?
the vaccinated
Guess
child,
which one has only ever had the flu, not even the flu, just a
the
cold.
non-vaccinated.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's why I think a lot of these things need to really play a factor into it, and that's what I love about Robert Kennedy and what
Right.
he's going to be looking
I
into.
absolutely love RK.
So, like I say, I could do a whole show on just him and this
I can't
situation.
Wait. I can't wait.
But these are the things that people don't take a look into when they look
Right.
into these VOCA programs, and they're moving into areas that take away the rights of the parent.
Right.
I mean, this is something that parents have been fighting for some time. I was young, and I'm a little bit younger, but I mean, I've watched my mother and other parents deal with situations as I'm growing up because I was put in a situation where I had to grow up fast.
Right.
So I
Same.
was paying attention to things that were, 50,
Other people don't pay attention
14,
to.
15-year-old
Yeah.
doesn't. But I started to see it even back then that,
yeah.
Just giving, discipline to your child,
Right.
not even just spanking, just discipline.
Right. Any.
A child can call the police
Oh,
or,
yeah.
in all these situations, it's taking away from you actually being a parent.
Right. You have no freedom to parent your children the way you see
Right.
fit. That's not abusive, Even spankings, I know it's controversial or not abusive, but I feel that they're targeting certain kids that have IEPs, kids that they might think are being neglected at home. I think these are the kids that they are purposely targeting for this because I think that there are some minds that want to shift it this direction and want to basically persecute people that don't believe, that may have old-fashioned beliefs because they're trying to it's social engineering is what I think it is.
Absolutely.
100%. And it's all about severing that connection between the parent and child.
Absolutely.
Because the child, you could change an entire structure of a country by attacking the next generation.
Absolutely.
And children are much more susceptible at a young age. And if you can just sever that connection between the first line of defense, which is you,
Yes.
and the child, then it's that much easier to mold them into what you want.
Anything.
And then you introduce the chemical instability of hormones.
Yes.
So what a lot of people don't understand is when you start supplementing testosterone, for example,
Ooh-wee.
testosterone will start aromatizing into estrogen. So as your testosterone levels go up, your estrogen levels are going to rise too.
Yes.
That is going to cause a big chemical
Huge.
instability, especially in women
Oh,
who
yeah.
already have to deal with chemical instability at least once a month.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. Because, women, we get like a dose of testosterone every month. Men get it daily. Okay. But my child starts, injecting themselves with testosterone. Yeah, I notice a difference. And I already know about this because I have an uncle that bodybuilds and used to inject, different steroids and things like that. And I would stay away. You know
Right.
what I mean? And so, I would see mood changes, talking about sex a lot more, very, very angry, not knowing what to do with those anger emotions, a lot more physically forceful. We actually got into physical altercations and that's when, I realized, I don't want this person in my home because this is not, you're not a boy just because you have testosterone flowing through you, just because, you might be a little bit stronger, you need to be with your dad because this is not going to work here.
Right. And I mean, and that's what I was just about to say is you get to the point where you have these situations and they're taking the rights away from our parents.
Right.
But then on the other hand, they're also questioning, why do we have these large rates in crime? Why do we have, single parent homes where children are going to prison or doing all these other things? I mean, I saw several different statistics where in a single mother home, you know, and I come from it, so I beat the odds.
You understand.
I beat the odds, though. I mean, when it comes to, you know, the level of aggression, the level of, you know, understanding. So, I mean, you're adding to the issues when you introduce things like this that take even more away from the parent.
They're attacking single moms, period.
Absolutely.
And
100%.
I don't agree with the single mom dynamic. I know it's popularized out in the world, this whole baby mama thing. I'm real old fashioned when it comes to that. I prefer marriage. You know, I believe in a home, the husband is the head of the home. That's that I strongly believe in that, you know. And so when I had to deal with that being a single parent, I knew the best thing for the kids would be to be with their father, because I, as a woman, do not have the authority. And I don't care what any woman says, oh, I can do it, I'm an alpha woman. I don't believe in that. I'm more of a Sigma myself. But I will delegate to the person who has the authority, who when they say something, they do it. You know, I have to say it 5, 6, 7 times, you know.
My wife deals with the same thing. She's like, why is it you can get the girls to bed so quickly? It's like, because they know I'll smack them upside the head.
Right, that's that natural order. They don't play when it comes to daddy. So I'm doing what's best in the best interest for the child, while the school thinks they're doing what's in the best interest for the child.
Right, and I mean,
it's a funny thing. I got my kids to react when I was over in Afghanistan over a video call.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, even when my wife is out and about, Mike, I tell her that same thing. She'll FaceTime me when they're acting up in the car.
Right.
Instantly.
I saw that here.
Yeah, I mean, I know Mike's seen it a few times because,
Right.
like I say, we're best friends outside of this, and you know, we call each other all the time, and you can hear the kids just screaming in the background. I go in the other room. So, I mean, having a father in the home is absolutely vital, in my opinion.
I agree.
I was an individual that
100%.
actually beat the odds, you know, because I saw what my mother went through, and I had the cognitive ability to be like, yeah, I don't want this for my family.
See,
So-
that should be
I
how
also
it
come from a single mama home.
See, and
Yeah,
you
I
both
also
beat
come
the
from a
odds.
single mother home, and you know, it's a lot of stress whether you're a single dad or a single mom.
Absolutely.
And when you're having to shoulder both responsibilities of nurturer and disciplinarian, it's so much added stress. And you know, you are the singular line of defense, where in a two-person house or two-parent household, you have 2 lines of defense.
Absolutely, and that's vital for
And
children.
and unfortunately, it's so much more physically and mentally imposing if a father is in the home
Absolutely.
for those destructive forces to come against.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I mean, in society, it's just it makes avenues for several different things. Like the biggest thing in the news right now is the whole Epstein, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's in regards to child trafficking.
Children.
I mean, you're allowing these kind of monsters to come out with doing things like this, unfortunately.
right.
I mean, you could sit here and you can say, well, we're just advocating for kids that, you know, feel different in the, you know, it's like you need to get them the proper, you know, I guess counseling, you could say,
Right.
to advocate for that. And it's like, because when you do that, you open them up to people that first of all, the parents don't know.
Right,
We don't know
have no
who
idea.
they are,
Right.
and we don't know their credentials. We
Right.
don't know their intentions.
Right.
And it could be somebody that, unfortunately, does things with children that
Why
they shouldn't
are they
be.
so focused on sex? Like, this is the thing. When I was in school, you know, yeah, we felt those hormones. Like, you know, you want to start doing stuff you wasn't thinking of when you were a child. But the thing is, my grandmother, that's who raised me. She would say, you know, well, why, you know, you need to be focused on your studies. You need to be focused on getting your driver's license.
Absolutely.
You need to be focused on all of these things. And if you notice these individuals that are so focused on their lifestyle and their sex, like, my daughter still doesn't drive a car because they are so focused on this other stuff that's just not important in the scheme of life. Like, none of that. You still have no driver's license. You still barely know how to answer the front door when somebody comes knocking. You barely know how to swipe a debit card. Like, you know, these life skills that you avoid, like you ignored because you were so focused on this. Why isn't there a counselor saying, hey, you know, I understand that you're having some confusion about your gender, but why? Let's remain focused on what's important. What's important is family. What's important is love. What's important is this and that. Are you being bullied? If you're being bullied, that's a different situation. Let's deal with the anger. Let's deal with that. But why am I grooming you to accept this and tell your parents if they don't accept it, they can go to hell? Like, what is that?
Yeah, I mean, even prior to 2010, yeah, that's kind of the time frame, 2010, 2015, that I've noticed this change. And prior to that, this kind of situation was a mental illness. It was
Yes,
deemed a mental
it still
illness.
is.
And I mean, even today, in the medical books, it still is.
Gender
and
dysphoria.
Exactly. But I mean, it gives avenue to other different things, like the whole situation with Title IX. I mean, we saw a big blow up between Donald Trump, President Trump, and the governor of Maine just the
Yes,
other day.
that was good.
And it was amazing.
Yeah.
The thing is they're still allowing women. I mean, it's almost like they say that they're advocates for women and and being strong women and all this, but they're allowing men like this
Yes.
to get into areas where they shouldn't be,
Right.
and they're dominating in these areas. 'cause,
Dominating women's spaces.
I mean, the sports. Like, I've got 2 young girls,
Right.
and right now they're in a co-op because they're only 5 and 8
Right,
when it
right.
comes to soccer. But when they get older,
Right.
they're going to be separated in different sports.
Right.
But the thing is where's the advantage for them to be able to shine if there's a man out there that is biologically better than them when it comes to sports? It's just a proven scientific fact.
Women have got to admit the truth, and it's very similar to the line of thinking that I'm saying about men being in authority. Women have got to admit, look, we're the weaker vessel. Okay, even a man my same weight, even less weight than me, can whoop me. Okay, he's physically going to be more adept than me, muscular. He has his bones, the way they're created, the way his pelvis is, all of that. He's going to dominate me. No, even if I'm at the top of my game. Okay, and this is something that women have got to recognize on get rid of this feminist idea, these feminist ideologies that I can do what he can do. You might be able to do what a man can do, right? And you might be able to think differently and may have a better lean on your intuition than a man might have. But physically, we have to understand that we have to let men lead and have their own categories in that area and quit trying to allow men to steal from our children.
Yeah.
It's theft.
Right,
100%.
absolutely.
And I think we've lost something really beautiful here with the third wave feminism. Is there's so much opposition between the two sexes / genders.
Yes, I hate it.
When in reality we're supposed to be complements of each other.
Yeah, we harmonize.
Yes, where I'm good at something, you're supposed to be good at something else.
Right.
Where I'm weak at something, maybe you're stronger at that aspect.
Oh, yeah.
We've lost something that is truly beautiful, and that complementing of each other goes hand in hand with raising the next generation.
Absolutely.
And honestly, this can really get into the household talk too, because having broken homes is what's leading to all this nonsense.
Absolutely.
Like for me and my wife, we couldn't be more polar opposite with our reactions, how we interact.
Right.
I mean, all our core values, our beliefs, and even politics, they're all the same.
Right.
However, how we approach it
Right.
couldn't be more
Right,
polar
right,
opposite.
right.
My wife is the loving, caring, sweet-hearted, shy more so individual. And me, if you're stupid, I'm going to tell you.
Right.
That's the kind of guy I
Right.
am.
Straight from the
and,
hip.
and we've clashed heads a lot. Don't get me wrong. I mean, but the society has made it so easy to
Right.
break up marriages
Right.
that they don't want to work at it.
Right.
Which is leading to all of this.
It
so I
is.
mean, it comes full circle.
It is.
So I mean, you really got to start with the household.
You do,
right? The
right.
man and the wife.
Right.
Me and my wife have had out many of times over the last 13 years that we've been married, because we got married young. I was
Right.
only 18. She was just turned 20.
Wow.
And
Your wife is older than you, huh?
Yeah, she is.
Oh, go girl.
And even though she looks much younger than I do,
bet
she's
she
got
does.
those good genes.
Yep.
But I mean, we have butt heads so bad.
Right.
But we made it up in our minds. We're like, hey, we both come from broken homes.
Right.
We don't want this for our kids.
Right.
And our kids are going to be better off for it.
Right.
Because even though we like to say, oh, they're just, hellions at home, and they're, how I introduce them to a lot of people, my wife hates it, is, oh, this is my oldest Aria, and this is my demon Ellie. Because my youngest is exactly who I am. She's just
Right.
outspoken, doesn't
Right.
care.
Right.
But, you get to that point where, you take them to other places.
Then you get compliments.
Every time.
Right.
You're like, your children are wonderful. They're the
Right.
most, respectful. And it's because, I'm a father, and I stand up and I say, hey,
got good roots.
like yesterday, my youngest is getting, she's just like me. So she says what's on her mind.
Right.
But that's kind of translated her being disrespectful to her mom.
Right.
And I don't say, hey, don't be disrespectful to your mom.
Right.
I make it known to them, hey, that's my wife.
Right.
Don't you ever talk to her like that.
That's right.
And that's how men should be.
I agree.
I mean, that's what's going to help these children understand it's not okay.
It's not okay.
This is how a family should be.
Right.
Because it'll start to
Absolutely.
eliminate this garbage.
And that's where the pattern is
100%.
set. That's where the pattern is set, you know, in the home. And, you know, that's why I started off talking about, you know, divorce. Like that right there, that brokenness. And then, you know, being able to be manipulated on two sides here, dad, mom, everybody being pulled, everybody wanting to be liked at the same time, you know, but still having some form of structure, you know, broken homes, that is where a lot of this stuff creeps in, you know, and so that's why I take accountability, you know, as a woman of God, you know, I understand now a lot more than I did back then. You know, I was raised by my grandmother. My mom, she didn't want to have anything to do with me, you know, don't know who my father is, you know, that leaves like a vacuous hole in you, you know, where
Right.
you're always searching for love. And, you know, it's just been, it's been difficult. And also, and I don't want to bring, you know, like race into it because I'm not that person, but being raised in the Black community, there's a lot of hatred. Okay. And there's a lot of expectations. There's a lot of things that, and I don't tend to coalesce with that form of society because I'm not a hateful person.
Right.
I don't speak that way. I don't talk about people that way. I give everybody a chance. I don't view people by color,
Right.
and I don't say, oh, because you're white, this is how you're going to act, or because you're Black, this is how you're going to act. That all plays in, you know, and this mindset in that community is like, oh, well, you don't need a marriage. Marriage is just a piece of paper, you
Right.
know, but they go out and get money every day, and that's just paper too,
Yeah.
you know. So it's like there's just a lot of hypocrisy and things like that. So that plays in, and I'm just grateful to God now that now I have this view of the home. So, you know, should anything happen to my husband now, you know, because he's old. My husband is 23 years older than me, and right now he's in the hospital. We're dealing with a lot, you know, in our marriage, but we still try to set just physically the example for our children that we
Right.
have now that, you know, I will never usurp authority over my husband. I don't care, you know, what phase we're at in our marriage. I just don't, because I'm old fashioned.
Right.
I wish more women were like that, because what I see a lot is women always trying to take control.
Right.
Women are very controlling. We have that in us, but it's so we can run our households right, not to control our husbands. And so I really wish that more women would just kind of tone it down a little bit. And I hate, and it's just, you know, talking about the man and the gender stuff that goes on,
Yeah.
you know, women just need to be softer and just let men take the lead.
Right.
Let them lead, and don't try to control everything.
Right. I mean, and there's caveats to
100%.
it too. I mean,
Right.
you know, you got to make sure you're picking the right man too. I
Right.
mean, that's the most important thing.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I was seeing my
Yeah.
mother. She was unfortunately had to go through 3 marriages.
I understand.
None of them were her fault.
Right.
Like my biological father was her first marriage. He screwed that up. He was the one that ended up in prison because of what he did.
Right.
And the next 2 were just absolute garbage men. So women out there, you know, I understand the pain of trying to find a good man nowadays, but you also have to have the intuition to say, hey, this guy, this guy isn't good for me.
Right.
So it
That's
is that.
hard because there's so much pressure, and I know this isn't about this, but
No, yeah.
there's just so much pressure on women to be married. And so when a man says he wants to marry you, you know, it's kind of like your brain goes like, okay, I'm going to be married now, you know, and you're not really thinking like, this guy is not it, you know, you're just thinking, okay, well, at least somebody wants to marry me.
Right.
And then there's just so much pressure, like, oh, well, it's up to the man to marry you, this, that, and the other, you know? And so there's just a lot, you know, you need
There's
to do
a
a
lot
show
of
on
different
that.
aspects that you got to take into consideration with this generation. Like
Right.
we live in the generation of hookup culture.
Right.
So there's never an actual breakdown and discussion surrounding values. And
I agree.
then they get into these relationships and it fast tracks into marriage, and then there's that confliction of values.
Right.
And
Quickly.
for those that are listening that, you know, may be divorced or, you know, may have had a breakdown in their relationship, it's not the end,
Right.
you know, if that relationship ends, right? I was married for almost 10 years.
Yes.
You know, there are faults on both sides of the breakdown of my marriage. And ultimately, like, what ends up happening, unfortunately, is that affects the children. And I have 3
does.
children from my first marriage. I'm a dad to 2 bonus children with my new wife.
Beautiful.
We just got married in January.
Oh,
Nate-
beautiful.
Nate was there. And so the most important aspect is taking accountability of where you went
Yes.
wrong in the
Yes.
breakdown
Yes.
and trying to build a bridge of open communication between you and that other parent, and then any other, step parent that may enter the relationship or the equation,
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
it's all about the children.
Yes.
Right.
Once you have kids, it's no longer solely about you.
Absolutely.
It's about fostering a productive environment for your children
Absolutely.
to succeed, and that comes with you taking accountability for your actions and maintaining an open line of communication and productive communication
Yes.
with all parties involved.
Absolutely.
And honestly, that is why, I know this is a little bit different from what we typically do on the Legislative Lounge, but honestly, it comes full circle,
Right, it's
because
full circle.
if you're not focused on the home, you
Right.
get into breakdowns that allow for, like I say, these avenues, but then it gets into different areas.
It
You
does.
have individuals in the federal, state, local governments that are coming from these kind of homes and seeing the dysfunction, and it really translates to your everyday life.
Absolutely.
So fixing it in the home
Right.
is what's going to solve a lot of the problems.
It is.
Because you see the government incentivizing the
Right.
broken home.
That's why I say they target them.
Absolutely.
They
And
target
it's
100%.
it's one of those things that's just like, when you start to see things like VOCA come into play,
Yes.
and you see how they're interacting with our children, with the whole LGBT movement in schools, and the indoctrination of gender studies, and
Yes.
all this other stuff for elementary school kids, you start to ask, how did we get here?
Right.
And honestly, in my opinion, it starts in the home,
It started in the home.
and it will. That's just where it is.
Right.
And we've reached a point now. It's not just the fear of hormones
Yes.
being given to our children without our knowledge.
Yes.
There's studies where it shows that girls are hitting puberty earlier,
Yes.
and now we're seeing waves of young girls being put on birth control.
Yep.
And now we're seeing stuff like the depot shot, where it's causing tumors,
Right.
and we're seeing all these nasty side effects associated with all these different forms of birth
Yes.
control. And now we have studies that show that birth control actually plays a role
Huge.
into partner selection.
Yes.
Mm.
And then it all comes down to chemical interpretation and chemical imbalances.
Yes.
And birth control plays a factor in that.
Huge.
Supplemental hormones plays a factor in that.
Huge.
Your food plays a factor in that.
Big
Me and
time.
Nate love to talk about food.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. You see what
So-
they're doing?
People need to read, and unfortunately, I say this a lot. Over 20% of the American population is completely illiterate. 65% of the American population doesn't comprehend
They don't
above a
comprehend
sixth grade
what they
reading
read.
level.
Yes.
People need to read. One
They've
in
dumbed
5
us down.
adults is completely illiterate.
Right.
It's unacceptable.
Absolutely.
We need to prepare our next generation.
And this is where we get into, we can pull this full circle to what we typically do on this, is getting into pieces of legislation
Right.
where you have people at all forms in the states, at the federal level,
Right.
it doesn't matter, just absolute nonsensical
Right.
type of legislation. We were just talking about one last week, Mike, where I believe in Mississippi and Ohio, correct? Yeah, so Mississippi and Ohio, where Democrat leadership was introducing a bill that would penalize men for having relations with a female and ending that relation, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be censored.
Gotcha.
Without the intent of procreating, that they want to inseminate the what they were, which is probably the problem. Mike, go ahead and tell us a little bit about that bill again.
So, it's criminally targeting men for essentially discharging genetic material without the intention of impregnating the woman.
Mm.
And what's actually sad about this bill, and it started with Mississippi. Thankfully, it failed in Mississippi. Ohio's got its own version. Both read very similar.
Okay,
The
hold on.
bill states that